World War I, often called the Great War, was a conflict that reshaped the world forever. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe was a continent full of ambition, power, and rivalry. The great empires, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, were competing fiercely for colonies, resources, and military dominance. This competition created tension across borders, and nations began forming powerful alliances that divided the continent into two major camps: the Triple Entente of Britain, France, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Although Italy would later switch sides, the alliance system created a dangerous situation where the conflict of one country could instantly involve many others. Europe had become a powder keg, waiting for a spark. That spark came on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by a young nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. This single gunshot shocked Europe. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and issued demands no sovereign nation could accept. Serbia turned to Russia for support. Germany stood firmly behind Austria-Hungary. France backed Russia, and Britain watched closely as tensions grew. A conflict that could have been small suddenly began to unfold into something far bigger. Within weeks, declarations of war spread across the continent. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, and then France. To reach France quickly, Germany invaded neutral Belgium, and that act brought Britain into the war. What began as a regional dispute exploded into a global conflict. As armies marched across Europe, the war quickly became unlike anything the world had ever seen. By late 1914, Germany's advance into France was halted, and both sides dug deep trenches across hundreds of miles, stretching from the North Sea all the way to Switzerland. Soldiers lived in these trenches for months at a time. The conditions were horrific: thick mud, freezing rain, rats as big as cats, and the constant threat of artillery and sniper fire. Between the trenches lay no man's land, a deadly open space filled with barbed wire, landmines, and cratered earth. Any attempt to cross it meant facing machine guns that could kill thousands in minutes. This new kind of warfare created some of the deadliest battles in history. The Battle of Verdun, which lasted for nearly a year, became a symbol of suffering and endurance. The Battle of the Somme, launched by the British, resulted in over 1 million casualties. Soldiers were not just fighting the enemy, they were fighting the environment, the fear, and the overwhelming power of industrialized weapons. World War I introduced technologies such as tanks, military aircraft, poison gas, flamethrowers, and submarines. It was the first war where machines, factories, and science played a bigger role than soldiers alone. The modern era of mechanized warfare had begun. While the Western Front became a brutal stalemate, the Eastern Front moved quickly. Germany and Austria-Hungary fought huge battles against Russia across vast landscapes. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. Millions of soldiers and civilians suffered. By 1917, the pressure on Russia became unbearable. Food shortages, poverty, and frustration with the government led to the Russian Revolution. The Tsar was overthrown, and the new Soviet government signed a peace agreement with Germany, withdrawing Russia from the war. This allowed Germany to focus almost entirely on the Western Front, but by then it was too late for them to achieve victory. Across the ocean, the United States had stayed neutral for the first years of the war. But in 1917, two major events changed everything. Germany's submarines began sinking American ships, killing civilians and threatening U.S. trade. Then, a secret message called the Zimmermann Telegram revealed that Germany had encouraged Mexico to attack the United States in exchange for lost territory. When this information became public, Americans were outraged. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. Fresh American troops began arriving in Europe, bringing new energy, supplies, and morale to the exhausted Allied forces. By 1918, the Central Powers were collapsing. Germany's people were starving due to naval blockades. Their economy was failing, and their army was exhausted. The Ottoman Empire was breaking apart. Austria-Hungary was facing internal revolts and nationalist movements demanding independence. The Allies launched massive offensives with tanks, aircraft, and millions of troops, pushing Germany back month after month. Finally, facing revolution at home and military defeat abroad, Germany asked for peace. On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the guns fell silent. The Great War was over. But the end of the war did not bring immediate peace. More than 20 million people had died. Large parts of Europe were destroyed. Empires that had existed for centuries, German, Russian, Austrian, and Ottoman, were gone. New countries emerged across Europe and the Middle East. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles officially ended the war, but it placed heavy blame and harsh conditions on Germany, forcing them to pay enormous reparations and accept responsibility for the conflict. These conditions created anger and economic collapse inside Germany, planting the seeds for another global conflict. Just 2 decades later, the world would once again plunge into chaos with World War II. But the legacy of World War I remains a powerful reminder of what happens when nations allow rivalry, pride, and mistrust to outweigh peace. The Great War changed borders, societies, and the global balance of power forever. It marked the end of old empires and the beginning of the modern world. And its impact still echoes in our world today, more than a century later.